It's always, is this working? Can you hear? It's always great to be the last speaker because you get to stave people off from nodding off. So I want to tell you a little bit about my life in some hope that it'll tell you a little bit about theories of change and theories of giving and theories of philanthropy. I'm South African. I cut my teeth in the anti-apartheid movement. I first organized amongst mothers whose children had been abducted and disappeared, then worked as the executive secretary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission alongside with Desmond Tutu for a very intense period of my life, and then founded an organization called the International Center for Transitional Justice, which did this work globally, tried to help countries deal with a painful past and steer a path towards accountability and reconciliation and justice. And I'm now the CEO of a luxury fashion brand, which makes sense. So I suppose I owe you an explanation of how I got from there to here. And in some ways, having established the International Center for Transitional Justice, having worked in 35 countries around the world, having raised $100 million in the process and having grown it to a staff of about 200 people at the high point, there were two crucial things that happened. One is we won the Skoll Award for social entrepreneurship, and I started hanging out in Oxford with social entrepreneurs. And two, I was chosen as a young global leader and started going to Davos, of all places. And in both of those places, I started to encounter people who were using the power of the market and the power of entrepreneurship to achieve social change. And as a human rights lawyer who came from South Africa, I was very accustomed and had grown quite adept at using the power of philanthropy to try and achieve social change. So at the high point at ICTJ, we were raising $20 million a year to support the organization. And here I found myself amongst a group of people who were trying to build businesses that could build and sell insecticide-treated bed nets as a way of avoiding malaria, people who were using microfinance in order to build wells, in order to be able to give women potable water. And they were using the power of markets and entrepreneurship to try and achieve social change, not just relying on philanthropy. And I hasten to add, before I go any further, nothing that I'm going to say tonight should be taken as suggesting that there is a preferable model to change the world. NGOs and philanthropy play an absolutely pivotal and indispensable and irreplaceable role. For-profit businesses play a very important role, and social enterprises which seek to marry and merge those two worlds play a crucial role. I'm going to tell you about one model, but I don't suggest that it's preferable to any other that you've either heard tonight or may be interested in yourself. So having seen the power of markets and having come from a world in which we worked on human rights and accountability, I then almost by happenstance read a book by a man called Ashutosh Varshney who looked at ethnic conflict in India. And Ashutosh tried to answer a rather deceptively simple question. Why was it that certain cities in India, which had the same economics and the same demographics, had very variable levels of violence? Some had very high levels of violence and some had very low levels of violence. He does 60 years of field work. He had 60 years of data, 12 years of field work. He writes this book, and essentially his answer is associational life. And what does he mean by associational life? He says the cities in India which have the lowest levels of Muslim and Hindu conflict have the highest levels of Muslims and Hindus in parent-teacher associations, in cricket clubs, and in businesses working side by side. Now this is stunningly intuitive and rather obvious that if you spend every day interacting with people from what could be the opposite side of conflict, you're less likely to be roused to arms and encouraged to kill them by demagogues who are trying to do so for their own political purposes. And at that moment, a light went off in my head, and the light said something, to the extent that lights can say things. It went something as follows. If we could find small businesses in developing economies, and we could grow them and make them more productive, and we could allow them to become more profitable and to increase employment, and we could find businesses which had a particular character, we could also simultaneously build stability in communities that in my prior life I had witnessed as places of conflict. And so I tried to think of a model which said, let's try and find three kinds of businesses. Businesses that bring people together from opposite sides of conflict and house people under the same roof. Businesses that focus on employing and empowering women, because we all know if you give women the status and resources that come with the job, they have a peace influence on men. And businesses that work on poverty alleviation in instances where an absence of employment or of opportunity have caused people to take conflict-related tasks as their option, as opposed to the dignity and stability-oriented tasks that come with a stable job. And at that point, I really thought, well, what's the model to do this? How would you go about doing this? And we looked around the world and looked at all the different verticals that you could do it in, and came up with the idea of building a brand and a fashion brand, because the idea was if you could source goods from businesses that met these criteria and source goods in a way that gave people greater value for the work that they undertook and therefore gave them more profit and gave them greater opportunity to expand profitability and sell those in markets where there were greater resources, we would be able to achieve all the developmental goals that we hope for, but also some of the peace goals. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this model and hope it invites a conversation. So there are two ways in which this model works. There's a not-for-profit organization called Nest. And Nest is an organization which seeks to find artisans, assess their needs, and provide them with the assistance they need in order for them to be market ready. And on the other hand, there is a brand that buys from artisans who have been provided with training and support and infrastructure by Nest. And the concept is really quite simple, that you need a not-for-profit fund that's able to get artisans to a point where they can sell, and then you need a brand that produces value and that can sell in order for those people who have been trained to have a sustainable income. And the marrying of those two models is what makes the model sustainable and what produces value. So Nest says trading and market access equals sustainability. It provides training. It helps retail partners get market access, and it focuses on producing sustainable businesses. So the methodology is to assess the needs of the artisan partners, to educate and develop the artisan partners, to connect them to a marketplace in order to produce sustainability. And the artisan partners that Nest selects must show strong leadership, they must be scalable, and they must be able of transforming their communities, and they must be working towards alleviating poverty, empowering women, or promoting peace. And Nest works on design and skill building, on providing facilities and safety, and providing people with business acumen and leadership development, providing people with technology and English literacy, and does so by delivering industry experts. It has a summer professional fellowship program which sends people from around the world to work with artisans in emerging economies and employs in-country staff to be able to provide sustainable assistance to artisans. And it does both monitoring and evaluation. It both audits how artisans produce, it makes sure that they perform according to a code of ethics, and it does both business reporting and a social survey in order to assess that artisans' lives are indeed improving through these interventions. So two quick examples. Nest and Maiyet, the brand that I'm about to talk about, found a group of carvers of horn and bone and hand pourers of brass jewelry in Kenya. And the artisans really produced stuff that was sold mainly in local markets and to some limited extent was exported. And both through Nest and Maiyet, we worked very closely with the artisans in order to get them better carving skills, better equipment, better tools, better approaches to design, in order to take what was rather rudimentary objects and turn them into much more valuable and covetable objects. And in order to take a circumstance in which Anton our key artisan partner was working in a very rudimentary and extraordinarily unsafe workshop attached to his house to build a full, complete workshop with tools, with polishing equipment, with a range of providing him with all the assistance that he needed in order to produce much, much more valuable jewelry. And the jewelry that he was able to produce by the end of this process was, depending on the particular piece, 7 to 20 times more valuable than the jewelry that he was producing to start with. Another project that we're working on that we're incredibly excited by is a project in Varanasi, India. As you may know, Varanasi is a city on the Ganges. It's the oldest continuously inhabited city on earth. It is the home of hand weaving in India, a 500-year-old tradition. Some of the most valuable, covetable, beautiful weaving occurs, hand weaving occurs in Varanasi. And about 20 years ago, very savvy Chinese business people identified the value in this hand-woven silk, built a series of factories on the border, made the silks in cheaper products, copied the jacquards, and started selling them both globally but back into India. As a result, 90,000 hand weavers are unemployed in Varanasi, and an incredibly beautiful, covetable cultural resource risks becoming extinct. So what we have done is produce, together with the very famous and wonderful British architect, Ghanaian architect who now lives in Britain, David Adjaye, a silk facility that we hope to break ground on in the next couple of months, which will house weavers in Varanasi on the banks of a tributary and give both Muslim and Hindu villages an opportunity to work side by side, but also a way to produce in a much more beautiful and productive way. So I'm skipping through these images. Okay, so two quick examples of interventions through Nest of both carving in India and silk weaving in India. But in order for this to work, you need a brand. People need to buy the goods, and you need to produce a covetable and desirable brand. So Maiyet is a luxury brand. It says it's pioneering a new luxury by celebrating the rare and unexpected. It's rare skills from unexpected people, unexpected places. It's built an entire media strategy to have the brand distributed. It shows its collections on the Paris runway, whether it's block printing from Jaipur, whether it's hand-woven silks from Varanasi, whether it's embroidered goods from Ahmedabad, India, where Muslim and Hindu women work together to produce embroidery, whether it's hand batiks from Indonesia, again, hand embroidery from Ahmedabad. And it's developed a bit of a celebrity following, from Kate Hudson to Charlize Theron to Alicia Keys to Kate Moss. And now I'm going to show you a few videos which give you a sense of the world of Maiyet plus Nest. So the first video is a video of Daria Weboe, who's one of the world's most recognized supermodels, wearing products produced in India, in Jaipur and in Varanasi. The next video shows batik being applied in Indonesia. These batiks are taken from stained glass windows in Peruvian cathedrals, which is part of Maiyet's Spring-Summer 12 collection. next video shows fine jewelry being produced in Jaipur, which is one of the most legendary places for the production of jewelry. And the final video, which we'll end with, is a video which shows hand weaving of silk in Varanasi. And these hand weavers will be housed in the David Adjaye facility that I referred to earlier. And with that, I end. Thank you.